Thanks for joining our Oracle Digital Assistant webcast series. I'm Jürgen Gress, member of the Oracle Product Management team. Today's webcast is the final in a series to create better enterprise chatbots with Oracle Digital Assistant. The webcast is live and on-demand recordings are available. For details, please see our newsletter and subscribe to our Video Hub channel. In today's presentation, the team will give us tips what makes a great digital assistant. Good afternoon, Daniel.
Hello, Jürgen.
So thanks for running the 6-part webcast series. And with us is Grant Ronald. Grant, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Bruno, thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So Bruno, you are with Infobit.
Yeah, thank you very much for this session. I am from Infobit, based in Brazil. We have a strong partnership with Oracle. Nice to meet you all.
Great, thank you. Frank, thanks for joining.
You're welcome. Good morning, or well, good afternoon, good evening, wherever people are.
What is the topic of today's best practice session?
Well, today we talk about channels. So it's an abstract term, but we'll make sure that after this session, you know everything about it.
Wonderful. So let's get started. We also would like to introduce Arti. Arti is an Oracle Digital Assistant to answer your questions. And please go to the Oracle documentation website and activate Arti in the lower right corner. At the documentation website, you can also find many labs and examples. Quick housekeeping, feel free to post your questions via the conference Q&A tool or Twitter #PassCommunity. At the end of the webcast, we will answer them. Slides will be available at our Video Hub channel and at the community website. Please share your feedback via the Zoom survey at the end of the webcast. Today's webcast is recorded and will be published at Video Hub. So Daniel, we did run a whole series of 6 different webcasts. Can you give us a quick summary?
No, absolutely. So first, we're very happy we had a lot of people attending these webinars, both partners and also customers. Today's the last session. The goals we set ourselves at the beginning was to create a set of best practices, end to end, to actually help everyone that is building a conversational AI project. And again, looking to the available webinars, and again, all of this is available on demand. So if you miss some of these sessions, you are able to revisit them. We recorded everything, and Jürgen is sharing all of that with you. But looking to the whole set, conversational AI projects are a bit different than normal projects, and we try to address that, right? We tried in the first webinars, we looked at the use cases, how to build a project, what are the necessary roles, the life cycle, these kind of things that typically or sometimes are often overlooked, and they're really important to address. Same thing with production quality NLP. This is something so specific to conversational AI projects that we really thought to bring lessons learned from our implementations and customers' implementations. And now the idea was to share those best practices with everyone. Same thing with the other sessions, entities, visual flow. Even though there are no platform features, we really wanted to teach how to make the best use of those features. So if you have missed some of these sessions, please go ahead. They are all recorded. This is the last one where we're focusing on the front end side of things, and I really hope you guys enjoy this one as well.
Great, thank you very much. Grant, are you with us now?
I am, yes. Good morning, good evening.
Thanks for joining. So what is for you a criteria to build a nice, really good enterprise chatbot based on digital assistant?
Here's the thing. I've had lots of discussions about this. Technology, we have discussions about technology, how good NLP is. That to me is kind of secondary. It's all about the process. It's all about understanding a good use case. It's all about training your team. It's all about getting good data. It's all about understanding your use cases, building for the use cases, understanding conversations. None of that stuff is actually deeply technical. It's just, and this is what we wanted to do in the best practices, it's just simply knowing that there is a big job to gathering data. There is an effort in a conversational project. There are skills that you might not have, and I think if you get that stuff, because previously in a lot of training we're focused on the technical nuts and bolts, and that's obviously important, but it's for building a successful digital assistant project, I think it's some of these softer skills that are probably the most critical, or the ones that we see are missing the most in implementations that are not exceeding expectations.
Great, thank you very much. With that short introduction, over to Frank. Frank, thanks for joining.
All right, yeah. So we will switch back and forth between my laptop and Daniel's, because Daniel is doing the hard work and showing all of the demos that we have prepared. This topic, as mentioned a couple of times, is all about channels. And as I mentioned, it's a very abstract term. What do you mean? What is a channel? You know, everyone could imagine that there is a channel somewhere between Britain and I think the coastline of Europe. But you know, there are different meanings for channels, and so in Digital Assistant we also have different meanings of what a channel is. So first of all, there are different types of channel. So we have a user channel, which handles the bot user interactions. But then there is also an agent integration channel. And there are two types of integrations that we can do through this channel. And if you go to Oracle Digital Assistant into the channel tab, then you see them all on individual tabs here. Now, the agent integration can either be that the bot calls out to a human agent, so like the bot gets stuck, and not to annoy the user on the other end, it will just route the request to an agent who then takes over on the same messenger client. And the second integration is where Oracle Digital Assistant by itself becomes an agent. So you're not going to the bot first, but you're going to Oracle Service Cloud. And then instead of dispatching you to a human agent, you, for specific categories, will be dispatched to a bot. And then the bot will interact with you. And again, with the option that if the bot gets stuck, to actually route to a human agent to help the bot out. And then depending on what dialogue mode you're on, if you're on the YAML mode, which is still a valid mode and which is the mode that we have forever as it feels, or if you're on the visual flow designer or visual flow dialogue mode, which is the new paradigm within Oracle Digital System, and we talked about this when we talked about dialogue flows, then you have the ability for both to call from an external application into the flow. So you could kind of interrupt an ongoing conversation a user has by sending the user a reminder, or just send into the channel. And this actually will not go via the vendor of the messenger platform. So you're not calling into Facebook, you're actually calling into Oracle Digital Assistant. And for the YAML mode, it's called application initiated conversations. And for the visual flow designer mode, it's called events 2.0. And if you go to the product documentation, or if you ask Arti, then both will point you out to what each really means, and also to documentation to read up so that you can set it up properly. But there's also an article in Oracle Tech Exchange that Daniel has written that is kind of a condensed version of how to set it up. And then last but not least, there is another channel which is called the system channel. And as I recall, probably nobody uses it, because all that it does is it has a reference to the embedded conversation tester. So you can switch on and off the conversation tester, like in a production environment, you might not want to have the conversation tester enabled, then you can switch it off. So what we do here today is we're just focusing on the user channel. First of all, it's the most exciting environment, but also all of the channels that I just introduced would give us enough content to talk for an hour. So we don't have that time. So we focus on the channel because this is the natural evolution of topics as we have this throughout this training. And the reason why we have channels last is that you shouldn't be biased by designing your digital assistant by what you want to expose your bot to, on which messenger client you want to expose it. So this is why we have it last, and we'll come back to it later when we talk about design principles. So here's the agenda that we have in the following. So we talk about user channel, introduce what it really means and what Oracle Digital Assistant is doing for that. Then we talk about the difference of a native channel compared to a webhook channel. Best practices will be covered completely in its own section called Channel Design Principles, because that's what it's all about. And then we will look into a specific channel more in detail. We see the Oracle Web SDK. Reason is it's a very popular channel. Second reason is that it is one of three SDKs that Oracle provides, where we actually own the channel, and you will have a lot of benefit coming out of that. And the third reason is that the SDKs provide you the option to use voice in your conversation with the channel. Well, you could also use Alexa if you want, but the voice integration is native in the Web SDK, the Android SDK in iOS. So let's start with channels. Well, just a simple tagline: a user channel carries the chat back and forth from a user on various messaging platforms to the digital assistant and its various skills. All right, so what this means is apparently the channel is kind of a front end. So messages go into the channel, and apparently a channel is very specific to a specific messenger, and I will explain why that is required. But then it also says that it will hand over the message payload to something in the back end, which is digital assistant, or if you want, you can configure a skill directly to it, though we recommend to use Oracle Digital Assistant as a front end. So user channels are separated in types. So there's a native channel type, which actually means that everything comes out of the box. So every native channel that we have are channels that Oracle built for you, and all that you need to do is just to configure them. This is why I call them no custom development needed. And all they do is really, they do the right thing for all incoming messages to dispatch them to the skill or digital assistant that you configured. And they also do the right thing for the outgoing messages, so that if there's anything that you do within your skill, that it will find a perfect match on the messenger client. One feature that is documented in our product documentation, but not really so obvious, is that we're providing a feature called zero downtime. Now you can imagine that once you have version 1 out of your skill or digital assistant, you will configure it to the channel, and then users will start working with it. And over time, you develop a second version, now version 2, which could be bug fixes and new features, and you want to roll this out. Now, if you want to roll this out to the same channel, then if you disable or actually deconfigure the version 1 of your skill or digital assistant, and version 2 would come in, then you risk a blackout, right? If you would just do a binary, switch this one off, switch this one on, then people who worked with the version 1 at the time that you do this change would be blacked out, means they would lose their session and have to start over again. So instead, what we're doing is that every ongoing session will continue with version 1, even though you configured version 2. And if this session ends, if the user session ends, the next time the user will start a conversation, then it will pick up version 2. And this way we don't have any downtime when you do an upgrade to your skill. Question is, what if my skill or my digital assistant has a flaw, which costs me a lot of money? So I want to make sure that version 2 will be immediately used. Then you can do this, because everything is just about configuration in the declarative channel, and there's also a button. If you press it, it will reset all the sessions. In this case, really, people would lose their current work, they're blacked out. But if there's a reason for it, if you immediately need to get to your version 2 and you don't want to have anyone being on version 1, then you can do that. You can reset the channels, and then everyone would start with version 2. But otherwise, and that's the default behavior, we will have this kind of moving migration or change to the version 2. That's, as I said, a nice feature, a great feature, but we're not playing enough drums on that one, and this is why I call it out here. Now, the webhook channel, that's a standard mechanism, a core mechanism that almost all messengers support. All messenger platforms have one way or the other to do post-back interactions between the cloud and a messenger client, or actually its provider, because there's always a platform or provider behind it. So if we look at Facebook Messenger, then there is Facebook as a platform provider behind it. And they do have a mechanism which is post-back driven, and that is known in general as webhook. Now, when you have a messenger that for business reasons you have to support, but we don't have native channel support for it, then you can build it yourself, and you're not building the whole channel yourself, but actually you build the integration between what's on our side and what's on the messenger client side. You dispatch the messages, and we will cover that in more detail later on. So let me continue with a very simplified version of the architecture. And again, I think with all of the topics that we had throughout this training, it's all about, if you understand what you're doing, you do it better. Yeah, so this is why we can keep it on that level, just to help you understand what channels really do. Now, I mentioned that for every messenger client, there is a platform behind it, a provider like Facebook or like Oracle or like Microsoft or Slack. And what they do is they provide a platform. This platform is queuing conversations. It has users, and that user actually you want to dispatch to Oracle Digital Assistant. So the channel will receive any message from a configured messenger like Slack or MS Teams, where the payload usually is sent as a JSON object or a JSON string. The channel receives that, and it will take that input and will convert it to a message format understood by Oracle Digital Assistant. And this message format is called conversation message model. And all our component that we discussed when we introduced dialog flow, or that we actually, or the messages that we work with to resolve intents, they're all kind of following this kind of conversational pattern and conversational format. So that's what we're working with, and the channel's responsibility is to make sure that whatever comes in from the messenger client is understood and converted properly to our internal format. And then the components will return the same format. And again, it's the channel's responsibility to turn that into a JSON representation that is understood by the messenger client to display that information. Very simple, as I mentioned. You see the two cones in this picture, and the reason I have them on it is because there's a lot more than we do than just like converting one metadata into another metadata. What we also do is we make sure that we make the best out of the representation on the messenger client. So the idea is that whatever you build in Digital Assistant, you should be able to run it on any messenger client unchanged. Yeah, so this typical idea of what Java had about write once, run anywhere. So that's what we have here as well. So you build Oracle Digital Assistant, and whatever we send out actually should run on the messenger client. And the optimization, that's something that we built into the native channels. So that's one benefit that you get from native channels. So let's look into native channels in general. So again, native channels are no-code messenger integrations in Oracle Digital Assistant. No-code because you don't have to build anything. The built-in support that we so far have is Facebook Messenger, Slack, Microsoft Teams, Cortana, Twilio, SMS, Oracle Web, which is the SDK, Oracle Android and iOS. And there are more on the roadmap that we release on popular demand, or when we see that customers actually, or say the use of chatbots is kind of moving. So I cannot tell you more about these channels because I don't know if we are here restricted in terms of what we can say and what we not say. So just for you to know, there will be more native channels coming as we go. The no-code integration means you just focus on building your digital assistant. So applying all of the best practices that you learned throughout this 6 event training, where this one is the 6th iteration, and you don't bother about the messenger client. What you should do, however, is you should be clear when you design the bot or when you plan your bot, what is the platform that you want to release to. That's all that you should be bothering in the beginning. Later on, like the later on is today, where we tell you a little bit about best practices. That is where you start thinking about what can I do better for a specific channel. So all of the configuration that you do for an inbuilt channel is declarative. So that includes configuring the session expiry. So by default, I think it's set to 1 hour, but you can set it to shorter if you want to make sure that if a specific idle time is like exceeding 10 minutes, then people should start over again. You don't want to keep that session open too long. There are some security settings dependent on the channel. It might be that you have a specific handshake to fulfill, and everything is handled and configured declarative. So no code on your side. So here's on the right-hand side, the screenshot of how the channel configuration for user channels looks like. As you can see, when you create a new channel, you have a list of supported native channels. You just select the channel, and then the configuration screen you see afterward will just show you the properties that are specific to configure for that channel. And then 2 things that you need to do. One thing is you need to map the channel that you create And for this, you use a value list. You map it to one of the skills or digital assistants on the ODA platform. And most important, and that's something that a lot of people tend to forget, you need to enable the channel. So this is a little toggle that you can see right after the channel enabled string in the picture, because if it's not enabled, then the channel will not receive any messages. Yeah, so especially when you start configuring the channel, if you forget to enable the channel, then the messenger client or the platform that you configure will not be able to do the handshake with the Oracle Digital Assistant platform, and for that reason, we'll just report an error. So make sure that you consider that. But then, even at runtime, if there's a channel that you want to set up for a specific time, like for a day, and after that you don't want anyone else to use it, you can just go to the channel and disable it, and the configuration will stay, but nobody will be able to hook up to the channel. So let's talk about the other work, the two cones actually that I had on my image. Now, by and large, messengers behave the same, except when they don't. Now, I talked about the payload, which is messenger platform specific. But if payload was our only problem, that the formats are different, I think then would be fine. But there is no standardization for what a messenger platform should provide, has to provide, or may provide optionally. And for that reason, the messengers that you're talking to are different in the number of functionality they provide, in the UI widgets they provide, and sometimes just even in the layouts they provide. And to deal with that out of the box, that's one of the main goals for native channels, to do the transformation. Just to give you one example, and we have a visual on this later on. The typical rich messenger client supports a carousel, like a carousel of cards. Well, Slack doesn't. Slack supports vertical cards. Now, if you decide in your design to go with a carousel of cards, then when you run your design on a Slack channel, then it's the channel that transforms the carousel of cards into vertical card designs. Yeah, if you look at the Oracle product documentation, what we have there is we have all channels that we support listed. We have them all listed with their additional features. We all have them listed with what their known limitations and restrictions are. And these limitations could be the length of a message string, the number of buttons they could have on a list of value, or the number of buttons they could have on a card. And all of this is documented. But for the standard use of Oracle Digital Assistant, our channels will handle this. Yeah, and there's also something in the conversation test that we show you next that helps you during your design to be aware of where your design has something that wouldn't work for the channel that you're testing. So let me first, before going into the conversation tester, tell you about a new feature that we added in 2008. And the long story is that customers always wanted us to provide a way to highlight specific areas in the text, bold, italic, or just arrange them specifically in a layout. And what most customers did is they decided to go for the web channel only and just used markup for that. So we were looking for what could be a generic metadata language to allow customers to do this highlighting and formatting, like list formats in text enumerations, so that this also would work across the different messenger clients. So in the end, we decided for HTML markup. So now you see that on a screenshot here, and this is a screenshot I took from our product documentation. You see a list of supported markup that if you put that into your text messages, then our channels, the native channels, would transform that information into whatever is the equivalent for a platform. Like Slack uses Markdown. If you want to render something in Slack in bold, it means you put an asterisk on the right and an asterisk on the left. Whereas in markup, you would use the B, right? And so we will transform that automatically for you. And just in case that there are some markups that are not well supported, then we will provide you, and I'll talk about later about resource bundles. You have the options using resource bundles, and use resource bundles in a channel-aware way, yeah, so that you can work around any kind of optimization needs on the messages. But anyway, so this is a new feature. If you use those tags, then our channels implementations will make sure that the formatting works across the channels that we have. So now we're getting into the support of different channels and different behaviors of the channel in the conversation tester. Now, if you build Oracle Digital Assistant, then most likely you use the conversation tester during development. So one of the things that you might not use frequently is that you can switch in the conversation tester between the channels that we support or the messengers that we support. Now, the conversation tester is not an emulator. So that means we're not emulating the behavior of a specific messenger client, but what we do is we simulate it. And so we give you information about, if you switch like from Facebook Messenger to Slack, we give you the information if there's anything in your code line currently that is not supported, like where you exceed in a message the number of allowed characters, and that will give you during development already a good help of understanding of what you need to be aware of when you build for specific channels. So here's the example I mentioned for Slack. So if we run the conversation tester with a channel set to Oracle Web, then you see that I have a carousel of cards. We have bacon pasta as a card. And if I switch to Slack on the same conversation tester, then you can see that we no longer have a carousel. Now we already mimic that this is a vertical card. So we cannot do this for all widgets. For instance, in MS Teams, you might want to use what they call adaptive cards, which is a very flexible way how to create a layout. And we will talk about this in this session as well. So this is not what we can run in the conversation tester because it's not an emulator. However, we can call out if you add too many buttons on MS Teams. So then we would give you that as a hint. And we cover how you can address all of the limitations later on. But as a hint of best practice already, first focus on what works everywhere, right? And then optimize for a few channels that you're actually planning to use. And the reason here is that if it runs everywhere, then it will also run for future channels that we don't know yet how they would look. Maybe you want to pick up Apple as a channel or something, yeah? So if you design it conservative in a way that it works everywhere, then you can later optimize for a few that you really want to use with your customers. So, and now I'm passing it to Daniel.
Thank you, Frank. So we pretty much covered the concept about the channels, native channels, the conversation tester. So I'm just going to briefly show a little demo of conversation tester. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on my screen. So we have a skill here that I'm going to use. It's called adaptive operator path. We're going to be using this skill across this and the next demos. And this is a skill that is meant to work on a couple of different channels. Okay, so the conversation tester. The conversation tester is useful for a lot of things. Obviously, testing the conversation, but if you are building an assistant for multiple channels, it really gives you the ability to try out your skill, your assistant, and see how that conversation runs in those particular channels. So, for example, you can choose this channel you want to run against it. So if we choose the Oracle Web, and I'm just going to say order pasta, so this is a simple skill. And this will bring the, and again, being a simple skill, what we have here, we just have a carousel with cards, right? So these are the common response cards displayed horizontally. This is the default, we have a picture, we have a title and a description, and we can obviously configure the actions here, right? Now, let's imagine you are also developing for Slack, right? So you also have the ability to choose Slack and run it. So I think okay, let me just go up. As Frank already mentioned, Slack adds a limitation in terms of displaying cards. It doesn't display them horizontally. It converts everything to a vertical display, as you can see here. Now, the interesting part here, there's two things. One is that you actually get that information, right? So you do get the channel limitation, and that information is displayed to you so that you are aware of that limitation. That's one thing. The other thing that is also important to understand is and Frank also mentioned that this is not an emulator, right? So this doesn't really run the engine as those channels. This is just simulating how the channel will potentially be displayed, and it does give you that information with the channel limitations to help guide you in your testing. Let's pick up another one. So Twilio SMS. So let's run this one here. So you can see on this one here, just supports SMS, meaning just supports the text, right? So obviously that stands out very clearly on the result here. You just have text, you don't have any cards, no picture, nothing at all. But also the channel limitation side, you do have that information, right? Cards not supported, everything is converted to text message, and also some other limitations that are shared to you. So the useful thing about this is that it allows you to test your skill, your assistant against wide variety of channels, and later on, and this is something Frank will talk later, which is you can test things like, and again, spoiler alert, channel custom properties. This is something Frank will talk in a little bit, which are specific properties that allow you to configure, to control the behavior of your conversation against a particular channel. So you do have that control, right? And those are things you can potentially test and try it out. Again, that's something that Frank will cover in a little bit. Just a couple of more tests. So if now we run against Twilio, SMS, MMS, obviously pictures are allowed, so slightly different than the previous version. And again, channel limitations, you do have slightly, a different warning here, a different limitation because we are now using the MMS. The important thing here is that you don't know, all of this is documented, right? So if you come, I think here, everything is documented. Here in the documentation, you have the documentation for obviously all of the channels. If I expand, for example, Slack, and for all of this, you'll have two topics which are supported capabilities and message constraints, right? For all of these channels, you'll have exactly a description of what we support for every individual channel, but also some of the constraints. And these constraints come from the channel itself. These are not ODA constraints, right? But all of this is documented. You don't really need to go with a trial and error approach. No, you do have all of that information up front. And this is really useful to help you customize how you actually want to work against all those different channels. One last one before I hand over to Frank, because after we're going to look into MS Teams. And as Frank mentioned, one of the unique features of Microsoft Teams is something called adaptive cards, which are cards that you can fully customize, fully design. So that is something that is not rendered here, right? So in this tester, again, this is not an emulator, hence adaptive cards are not displayed in the tester. And this is good to be aware of that, right? I'm going to pass back.
Okay, so the next topic is really briefly to talk about webhooks. So we're not diving deep here because this is not really meant to be a developer session in the sense that we show you some coding or something. But the way we look at webhook is that it integrates any messenger with Oracle Digital Assistant, still following this paradigm of don't bother what the channel is, because in the end you will have something that transforms the outgoing messages into an incoming messages and the other way around. And this is the webhook. Now, the webhook implementation is something that you would build yourself. And what you do is you build like the man in the middle, so to say, between the messenger platform, for which we don't have a native support, and the Oracle Digital Assistant. And what we do to assist you is we provide sample code and a library that will help you to transform incoming messages into Oracle Digital Assistant messages and the other way around. And it's provided as part of the Oracle Bots Node SDK. It's the same Bots Node SDK that we talked about when we talked about backend integration for custom components and entity event handlers. What you would need to do, and again, it will help you with that, most of the, or actually almost every webhook implementation will require some sort of XHub signature in the header to do some sort of handshaking so that the digital assistant knows that the request comes from the messenger client and the messenger client knows that it is talking to a well agreed upon digital assistant. And again, the Bots Node SDK has code for that, so it will assist you in this, but actually everything else that is needed, and one of the things that would be needed is the handling of the queuing of the messages. But again, here, it's not necessarily that you would have to build it. If, for instance, you would build an integration with Twilio, and if that integration is to one of the services or messenger clients they support, then they would handle all of the queuing for you. All that you would need to do is just to dispatch between their queuing and Oracle Digital System. So that is what you need to be aware of. So the way that it really works is you have a third-party messenger, which is something that we don't support, or you build your own messenger, maybe. And then we have Oracle Digital Assistant on the other side. Then the only thing that really is missing is the piece in the middle. So there's a message queue that must exist somewhere. Either you build it yourself, like on Oracle OCI platform, where you use your own queuing mechanism, or you use a third-party provider who provides that. And then you will just have a webhook implementation. It's just like a little bit of a Node.js code that executes like an Oracle Kubernetes or wherever you want to save it, that will receive post requests and that will send post requests. And this way it will dispatch the messages between Oracle Digital Assistant and whatever the third-party client is. So, and that was all that we wanted to say about webhooks. Again, the principles of the responsibility are the same. Of course, it will not automatically transform markup into whatever the equivalent of the third-party messengers that you want to integrate with. But if you use markup, then you know that the messages will contain markup. So if you want to do this transformation, then again, with webhook, you could do that. So what we want to drill down now into is the Oracle Web SDK, and maybe this Oracle Web SDK will already help you, like other SDKs, like for Android or iOS, to integrate with your website or your web application or your mobile application, so that there's no need for third-party messengers per se. So, oops. So first of all, before I do Web SDK, sorry for pointing out the wrong one. First, we want to talk about design principles. So from webhooks, now that we covered native channels and webhook channels, we need to talk about best practices before we go to the Oracle Web SDK. But keep in mind what I said about the Web SDK, it's all true. I just do a little detour now with best practices. Now, one of the design principles and why we calling this out specifically is that though our native channel is doing a lot of integration stuff already, and you don't have to code for that, still by your design, you could, well, at least make the wrong decisions in a sense that you may be focusing too much on a specific channel. Yeah, so if you design like for a very rich channel, like a Microsoft Teams, and if that is your primary train of thought, then it could be that you're building a bot that works really, really well on MS Teams, but in the end will cause some trouble on other channels. So this is why we typically say that when you set up to build an Oracle Digital Assistant, know about the channels you want to support, but build first so that it would run everywhere, and then, as I mentioned before, optimize for a few. So in the past, actually, before we introduced this generic markup in 2208 that we actually transformed to the equivalent for channel representation, developers went for a quick win. And there are a lot of developers who actually used HTML markup just to satisfy the need of their customers for message formatting and nicer layouts. And what they did is they coded HTML markup straight into the dialog flows. Now, this works well with every messenger client that supports markup, but it doesn't work at all for messengers that don't. So what you would wish you would have done to that point is that you would have implemented something that would understand what is the channel type it's working against, and if needed, just adapt. And the way it would adapt would be that it will either render a different flow, or that it would use different components, or maybe it just messages without the markup. So again, today we have support for a simple set of markup that you can use and that would work generically. But still, when you use the markup, think twice does the markup that you have in mind and the requirements that you have, would that really work across all channels? And if not, you have to think about designing for it. So and that gets us to a topic I love to talk about, which is adaptive bot response design. So what is adaptive bot response design? Now, adaptive bot response design allows a channel-specific message and flow optimization. And this can be implemented without interrupting anything and without changing anything major in your code. Because that's the difference between designing for a specific channel and optimizing for a channel. Because when you optimize for a channel, you have something that you built before that works across the channels. And then you look for a specific optimization like adaptive card in MS Teams, and Daniel will show you that in the next demo. Then you know that if the channel is MS Teams, hey, I have a better option. I just show you adaptive cards. But if the channel is not MS Teams, then the normal carousel will be shown. Yeah, and this is what we mean with optimizing for a specific channel. So you have one digital assistant and one set of skills that work across the channels. That's the key message. The second then is, if there are channel limitations, yeah, so like you like to have 20 buttons. So I think every UX designer would tell you not to have 20 buttons. But if you wanted to have 20 buttons, then the question is, how do you handle channels that don't support 20 buttons? Yeah, so we would call it out. We say, look, like this channel doesn't support 20 buttons on a card. But you would need to be able to say, okay, if I'm hitting a channel that doesn't support 20 buttons, then I just show these 10. But I don't show the other 10. Yeah, maybe there are some buttons that are not as important as others. Or as you could see in the demo that Daniel showed for SMS, where then the image isn't rendered and instead you see the link. Now here you might decide and say, okay, if the channel is SMS, I don't show the link. Yeah, because it makes no sense. And this is adaptive channel customization or adaptive response layout. You can also leverage channel specific features. If you go to the Oracle documentation, there are some properties that you send that will have an impact to like how images are laid out and rendered, or how specific functionality becomes available. Like Slack has support for modal windows. So if you want to use that, then you can do that. But this is a channel optimization. So that's nothing that every channel would support, because this is specific to one vendor, which is Slack. Yeah? And the same for optimization would apply to the message length. You can imagine that on a rich channel like MS Teams, like Facebook, and like the Oracle SDKs, you can scroll, and people don't mind necessarily to scroll unless you overdo it. But if you're on SMS, you want to make sure that the messages that you send are short and crisp. And it also has to do with that an SMS will only send a specific length of message string. And if you exceed that length, then it will send another SMS. And there's no guarantee in their SLA that the second message will be received after the first message. So you would have to actively design for it. But then if you know that a specific web SDK implementation or web channel implementation is more likely to be used with voice, you want to keep that information that is sent to the messenger client short, right? So there's a lot of opportunities in looking after the fact into optimization. But again, everything that we discussed so far about designing bots is all true, and it's channel independent. This is why we have channels as the last topic of this series. So let's drill a little bit down into adaptive bot response design. So adaptive bot response design is a server-side bot response optimization. So that means you use either Apache FreeMarker expression in your dialog flows, or you use the switch component to navigate into different branches of your flow, or you might even decide to use different flows if you work with a visual flow designer to address known limitation of one of your favorite channels, in which case you would say, okay, system, if I'm talking to that channel, go to this flow. If I'm talking to that channel, go to this flow. But then if you only need to change the message structure or length, then you don't have to create a flow. So you're really flexible in how you can respond to it. But the key is that you have something that works and that you want to optimize. So it's a tailor-made solution that you do for a specific channel optimization. This also might mean, especially when you create separate flows, that you have redundant implementations. But again, think back when we talked about model-driven conversations. A composite back entity doesn't really bother if it runs a conversation on MS Teams or Slack. So if you plan to have different flows for different channels, make sure that most parts of the conversation, for instance, go in a composite back entity, because then you don't build redundant implementations. You would reference the same composite back entity. And here you see like how greatly and perfectly all of what you learned so far comes together in this topic here. Adaptive bot response design is not an industry-wide term, so it's a term that we use just to make our point, and it's very related to what we know about adaptive design when it comes to web application development. So let's start off one of the tools to talk about one of the tools that you have available, and that's called custom properties, or more precise, channel custom properties. On specific components or / templates, if you're on the Visual Flow Designer, we have the ability to add an additional property called channel custom properties. And this channel custom properties then will hold key value pairs, where actually the value could be a free marker expression. So it can go quite complex. And if you go to our product documentation, you look what are the possible channel extensions, then we will list all of the property value pairs that you can set. And if you add a channel custom property to it, then you can define when this property should be used. So you basically name the messenger that this property should be sent to the client. In most of the cases, sending properties the client doesn't understand doesn't really matter, but just in case you want to tune it. And just to give a little bit of a heads up, the channel custom properties can also be used with the Oracle SDKs, which means if you're on the web channel, I can send additional information. Like if I want to have the web channel displaying an alert, which is a client-side thing, I can send a hint to the web client and then listen to it, look into the message, and if I find that it should show an alert, I can create or execute custom JavaScript to show an alert. But that's just the simplest way of an example, but you get the picture. So channel custom properties send any additional metadata you want to the client. And if the client knows how to render it and how to interpret it, then it will provide additional functionality that otherwise it wouldn't provide. So here's an example with the channels property. So we see on the right-hand side in this box, the YAML code. So if you're on the YAML editor, then on the system common response component, you will have a property channel custom properties that you set. You define the channel property, which is the name of the channel, like Facebook, Slack, MS Teams, web. Is it Oracle? No, it's not Oracle Web. It's just web and Android and all this kind of things. So you identify the channel, and then you have properties that will have key value pairs. If you're on the Visual Flow Designer, then what you should use is user messaging, channel specific messages, and then you can choose directly if you want to work with Microsoft Adaptive Cards, with the date picker on Slack or Slack block it. Or what you can also do is you can go to user messaging, and then you choose one of the options which are declaratively customizable, because they would underneath use a system common response component, in which case you can use the same code that works for you today in YAML. If you decide to render user interfaces through a custom component or entity event handler, then you also have the channel custom property available. It's just called an add channel extension. So you would create a common response or common message format response object. And we discussed that when we talked about custom components and entity event handler. You just need to go back to the Oracle Video Hub to watch that part. If you didn't attend the live session, then once you have this message object, all that you do is you call context add channel extension, pass that message object as the message argument, give a string representation or a string name of the channel. So it's like here in the example is Facebook or webhook. And then you can specify an object, and this object is what you would send as a channel custom extension. Yes, so you have that available in your own code as well. So switching back to Daniel, who will now show you channel custom properties by example of MS Teams support.
So the whole story we're talking about adapting your assistant, your skill to the channel is exposed. So the principle of one implementation, exposing in multiple channels. And particularly the channel custom properties that Frank was just mentioning. So that gives the ability to bring some capabilities on the channel that is being displayed. So let me just show you. I previously in the previous demo, I showed in the conversation tester, I ran with MS Teams, but we just saw the normal default horizontal cards, right? But now we are actually running in MS Teams. So what you can see here, this is not a default card, right? So we have a adaptive card, which is this fully customizable card that you can configure, and you can see it's different, right? Picture on the left side, text on the right. So you can, this could be anything. So what we see here is the display of these adaptive cards, and the reason for that is obviously we are on MS Teams as a channel, but the reason for that is because the skill actually makes use of the channel custom properties, which is the ability to say, you know what, if you are running on this channel, please go ahead and make use of the adaptive card. So let me show you that a little bit more in detail. In reality, let me just go ahead and finalize this flow because there's another adaptive card here just to show you. So, and you see this is, the final one, completely different than the previous ones, just, gives that level of flexibility. It's one of the most used features in MS Teams. Now, back to the skill itself. So this is the skill we've been using. This skill is using YAML, so it's not using the visual flow, but for this particular, I just want to highlight a couple of things so it's actually easier to see the YAML markup. But obviously, we do recommend using visual flow for any of these implementations. So what I want to show here, this is a very short dialogue, right? We do have a variable that contains all of the menu items, and then we just display that with a common response. We have a layout, and we just iterate over that variable, and that's how we display the entire carousel, horizontal carousel, and that's the default behavior. Now, if you come here, you will see the channel custom properties, and this is the interesting part, right? So what we're saying here is that, okay, whenever the channel is MS Teams, please go ahead and display all of these. So this is the adaptive card definition, okay? Obviously, if you'll be working with Slack, you'll have channel Slack, and you'll have some other sets of properties. And to know which properties you can work with for each channel, that's when you need to refer to the documentation, to the limitations on one hand, but also to the message capabilities. And that's where you'll get the information to know exactly what you can implement here. On this particular example of adaptive cards, can also show you a place where you can design your card, right? So obviously you can see here a card, you can drag and drop. You can pretty much spend some time here working out your card, defining your card. And here in the bottom, you get a JSON representation of what you just built. So you can always refer to this JSON representation and sort of part that and refactor that into the YAML structure, which is what we support in the dialog flow. And that was about it. So in this particular demo, I just really wanted to highlight and to focus the channel custom properties and how extremely important these properties are, for you to create one skill that you can, expose in multiple channels, making use of those channel capabilities, not just have, the same sort of flat out representation. Back to you, Frank.
So another topic to cover briefly, and we need to switch gears a little bit so that Bruno gets enough time to present his WhatsApp implementation. So resource bundles are a way to deal with messages. And I said that it might be that the customization that you need is purely on the messaging level. So you don't want to change the flow, you don't want to change components, but you want to make sure that the wording is different based on the channel. That, in a perfect world, if like young people would use channel A and old people would use channel B, then you can use this channel distinction even to address them formally correct. Yeah. So message bundle, our recommendation always is to use them everywhere. So I mentioned that in the past when people went for a quick win, they just put their strings into the dialog flow in YAML and then they put markup in there. But that pretty much means that the only channel that worked for them in the end was the channel understanding markup, which mostly is the web. So instead, use resource bundles. This is not only a requirement for multilingual skills, but it also helps you to organize your messages because you can properly name them, put them separate and not in the dialog flow. This helps, by the way, copywriters if they do their job. So if you have a good naming convention where the name of the resource bundle key will match the flow name and the state name, then the copywriter would always know where to find it and also or would be able to give it some context. It's not 100% perfect because copywriters like to see at runtime how a specific message is displayed to see the context and understand. But actually it helps them quite a lot if they know where in which flow, in which context a message would be used. But then also the resource bundles can be used for displaying adaptive bot responses. And I have samples on this one, but before I can show you that, just for you to understand how you would reference resource bundles from either entity configurations or from dialog flows, there is a mystical variable named RB, and that's available in the product automatically, and that can be addressed using Apache FreeMarker expressions. So here we have RB and then brackets with single quoted a string in it, and that is the resource keys. You can also have arguments that you can pass, and I have a slide on this one as well. But from the basic principle, you can use Apache FreeMarker expressions from entities, from skill configuration panels, but as well from the flows to reference resource bundle key content whenever you want to have a message being displayed out of these bundles. So here's an example where we show that for a simple key, which is welcome.message. If you reference this with RB and then welcome.message as a message key, then it will print exactly what's in the resource bundle. But then you can also have parameterized resource bundles. So that's what we show below, where we have positional index in the bundle. So here I would pass two arguments. So I would have single quote welcome.message to reference the key, but then I pass additional arguments, which would then fill up the positional index. We also have named indexes, which I would recommend, in which case the formatting looks a little bit different, but we're not drilling too deep into this topic because there is a Oracle Design Camp session on Oracle Video Hub where we just have 1 hour on everything that you need to know about resource bundles. So I would suggest you look into this because this really is very powerful. So let me show you one example in which we are able, by passing the channel name into a resource bundle, to have the resource bundle dealing with different messages to print out depending on what the channel is. So first of all, I have a resource bundle key, which I called sample message. And you see this red key used in the samples below on the lower end of the slide. So I have RB sample.message, and that will in general just reference the message string. Then in the message string, so in the content of that message, we have a variable that we call channel type, or it's a parameter. And you can call it if you want. You can call it Hans, Fritz, Joe, whatever. We call it channel type. And this channel type is an argument that we send in, and that will have a value of like Web SDK, MS Teams. And if it has any value that we don't foresee, it will follow the other section. Now, what we can do with that is now we can use, and the format that is used by this is called ICU message format. If just in case you go to the Design Camp videos and watch it, then we talk about ICU message formats. This will allow us to send now the channel type as an argument. And at the bottom of the slides, you see that we have channel type as an argument passed into the string. And then we pass a variable reference, which is system channel type, where it depends on from where you call it. If you call it from a dialog flow, it's system channel type. You don't need to have a specific separate $sign. But if, for instance, if you reference it from the prompt on an entity, then you would use a single quote and the $sign again. But the system channel type is a built-in variable that will return values like Web SDK, MS Teams, and that will indicate the channel. So that is one way to use it. So Oracle Web SDK, now I'm to where I thought I would be 20 minutes ago. Now, this is an SDK. It's a full messenger that you can add on your website or integrate into your web application. And it has two modes. It has the typical default mode, which is where you see a messenger popping up as you would experience it with Facebook messengers or MS Teams. No, not MS Teams, but Facebook Messenger, which also pops up a dialog. But you can also have a modal mode, which means that it will fill up the whole area, the whole web area, or actually the area that they give it in an iframe. And then you have a lot more real estate. That's more likely than like in Slack or MS Teams. Now, it's a ready-made messenger. You don't have to do anything with it, but there are declarative options for you to customize the behavior, but also the look and feel. And we'll talk about this in a second. It's also providing a JavaScript API, so you would have the ability to call in and out from it. So to call into it, there is an object called bots. If you just call bots, you can open the dialog, you can close the dialog, you can clear everything, you can send messages programmatically. So if there's something on the website that happens that you want to send as a message, then there's an option for you to call into this messenger client and send a message to Oracle Digital Assistant. And then for the outgoing way, there is something called delegate objects that I have a slide about, which would allow you to send something back from Digital Assistant and have this interpreted by your JavaScript and then perform something on the parent page. It has the same functionality as other messengers in the sense that you can have attachment servers to it, so you can upload documents and access this from Digital Assistant. Configuration is the same as for the native channels in general. So you choose the Oracle Web as a channel, and then it has a couple of properties for you to fill in, like a name that would identify the channel. The description is always useful. Channel type is Oracle Web. For allowed domains, you can restrict the domains that have access to your channel. So if I can put in .oracle.com, then only clients or websites that are owned by Oracle would be able to access this. You can set it to an asterisk, which basically means everyone could access this. And that's typically the setting that you would have when you develop. There's client authentication that by default is enabled. This would require the client to send a JWT web token to authenticate the client. It's a kind of a further restriction to the broadness or the scope of access. So for development, I would suggest that you disable that. So because we would assume that your development would be from a local environment anyway. And then you see that you can specify the token expiration as well as the channel timeout. For the JWT token, if you go to Oracle Tech Exchange, there's an article about it. If you go to the Oracle product site, there's an article about it. And I think we also have one of the doc writers, Chris Cutler, writing a tutorial about it. So it's all well covered, and you will learn about how to work with the JWT token. And this is really worth looking into because it's a great security feature that you can add. To get to any of the native SDKs, you just go to the Oracle website. It's referenced from the doc page, and then you have the Oracle Web SDK or the Android SDK or the iOS SDK for you to download. So switching back to Daniel, who shows you quickly how you work with that.
So the Web SDK is, I would say, 90% of the times I configure a channel is the Web SDK. It's by far the most widely used. And as Frank was mentioning, we, from our documentation site, we have a lot of, we have the download links that you can download. This is the latest one. And now I think every 2 months or so, we have a new release. If you download this zip file, what you'll have is a self-contained, I'm not sure if you can see properly my screen, it's a bit small, but okay. So what you see here are samples. You can find samples, React, Angular, Cordova, and Web. So this is the one we're interested on. And here, what you see here is a sort of self-contained folders that, it's a ready-to-use web SDK. If you open this index, this is just an HTML, which will have an embedded widget, things like styles and images that you can, because this is fully customizable. You can configure, customize everything from Web SDK. You also have the Web SDK JavaScript. This is the engine. You should not touch this one at all. The one you should be focusing on is the settings.js. So this is where, let me just open this one to show. This one here, and again, we're not going in detail here, but this is where you actually configure a couple of important things. One being the URL to your ODA, and the second thing being the channel ID, right? So when you create a channel in ODA, there's a channel ID that is generated, and that's what you need to bring here. Once you just do these two parameters, you're actually, that's all, you're ready to go, and you'll have your widget connected to the backend, to your skill or digital assistant, right? I'm not going more in detail here, but I just want to highlight that we have here what we call feature flags. I think Frank will cover some of those. And these are parameters that you can configure to do things like, enabling audio, enabling speech, there's a ton of parameters that allow you to customize and configure the Web SDK. Okay, so I'm not going in detail here, but just really want to highlight that. I do have my own settings file already with the URI, the channel ID, and I do have it here. This is that index HTML that comes with the Web SDK, and you see here on the bottom right the widgets. This is all of this is default, right? I did not change anything. As I mentioned, everything is customizable. So if I go here and let's say order pasta, and again, we are still working with the same skill as before. And you see here, obviously, a much better layout than ones on the conversation tester. And you see the horizontal cards being displayed here, and you can just scroll through that. Very powerful. There's a ton of features to configure, to use, to make use of. It's the most widely used channel, and I really strongly suggest everyone to have a look at it once you start working with channels. Back to you, Frank.
Okay, so by the way, you don't necessarily have just to use the index HTML file. You can just take the content in that file and make it part of your own website, and also then put the libraries not on a local drive, but put it somewhere on your server. So feature flags. So Daniel mentioned that it's the behavior, the look and feel, and some of the functionality is declaratively configurable. So I only have a screenshot here of the documentation, and the documentation is available online on the Oracle documentation page, but it's also part of the Web SDK download. So you will have the file there, so you don't necessarily have to go online for it. But it has a couple of properties like flags, like the embedded flag, which will indicate whether you have a the chat within your website, or if you would have it as we showed it as a pop-up window. Then we have the delegate property, which is the first one that you see in the screenshot, which I will show you on the next slide, how that will be configured. Then you can enable security, you can enable autocomplete, you can enable long polling, just in case that the default WebSocket doesn't work for you for whatever reason. It's worth really reading through the properties, and they all come with the default settings. That means if you don't set them, they will have a value. Typically, they are switched off, but it's worth really reading through it. So the one thing, and I mentioned this as a delegate object, and I did mention this a couple of times. Now, the delegate object is an object with functions. Yeah, so there are three events that you can listen for. One is before a message gets displayed. So that is the bot sends a message for display, and before it displays the message, you actually will have the chance to interrupt with that. So you can check for channel custom properties, and if you find something that where the digital assistant will hint you to do something, you can do that in your JavaScript. Or if you just want to change, I don't know, if you want to apply something to it or add something to it, then you can do that as well. In the end, you return the message object, and whatever you return will be displayed. The other option is that you have before send. And this is that a user types something in. If you want to turn that all uppercase, you can just intercept the message, turn it all uppercase, return the message, and then it will be sent to the bot in all uppercase. So anything that you can do in JavaScript and that you can apply to a message object, which is basically a JSON object with a message string part of it, would work. Similar if you have buttons that render, if they're pop-back buttons, like a list of value, if someone presses the button and you want to do something with it, then again, you can change the postback before it's being sent to the digital assistant. There are two ways to add a delegate. One is to use this bots object that I mentioned. Again, in the settings page that Daniel showed, you can have just the call bots.setDelegate and just point to your object, or in the delegate property, you would just associate it with the delegate object, and then it will call it as well. Yeah, and that's very powerful. So a lot of the examples that we have in Oracle Tech Exchange that deal with the Web SDK use the delegate object one way or the other. Here is a view on properties that will change the behavior. So we have like display actions as pills. So there's like a visual difference in the visibility. Then how do you want to go with past actions? So someone has a list of values, selected a value, now is on a different conversation state. Do you want these actions to be available so that they can scroll back and just hit the actions? Or do you want to disable them, which you can set, in which case you would set them to none? Then it means that as soon as you click the button on the screen, they will become not actionable anymore. So they become read-only. You can also specify where actually some messages that you want to put on top of the messenger should be displayed. You can define where actually in the messenger the input should be put when you work with it. So by default, it's always put on the input message bar. You can send your own message profiles. So if you want to have it, say, typically you have a user profile. Now, if you want to send like the user local time offset, that's one of the examples you have an Oracle Digital Assistant Tech Exchange, then you can send a user profile where you pass the profile property, the custom property to it, and that will become accessible in FreeMarker through profile and then the property name. So here's where you can have functional differences. And then, of course, the overall look and feel in terms of the avatars, the icons, the fonts that we use, the colors. So everything can be customized through style sheet classes, and everything would go into a single place so that you don't have to search for it. You just have it all in one place. And again, if you go to the documentation, there are two parts in it. The first part is all of the declarative settings, and the second part is all about the programmatic settings, because everything that you can set declaratively, you can also set in your JavaScript. So this will give you the best integration to your custom web application. So the last topic to talk about, and again, it's kind of related to the Web SDK, the Android SDK, or iOS SDK, is to talk about voice. Now, on our own channels, which is Android, iOS, and Web, we have a native integration for voice, and that is, again, configurable. We can display this little microphone icon. When you click that, you can talk to it. We have our own speech-to-text engine that will translate the spoken words into text, and then it could be sent. And again, as I said, this is declarative. You can decide not to show it, not to use it. The same for reading audio. The other options that you would have, if you want to have pure voice completely outside of a web application, would be to use Alexa or Twilio voice APIs. But that's a different integration, then that would require a webhook, but that's also a choice. In general, is that the idea of having chatbots interacting with voice is really something upcoming quite a lot. More people look into controlling it with voice, and we provide that option through the web SDKs or through a webhook. The voice support, I mentioned that we have the microphone, and we also have an equivalent for a speaker symbol. So if you want to read that or actually get the message read, the messages will be read by the browser-specific voices. So and there's a slide I have later on that shows you how you can tell which voices are available for a specific browser. But the key point is everything is on board, and we do the speech-to-text conversation for you. And then you would interact with the bot as you would do before. So there's this speaker sign. Again, there is a property for that, which is called enable bot audio responses. If you set that to true, which also is the default, you would see that. So let's switch to Daniel for the last demo from our side before Bruno shows his demo.
Yeah, so this one will be short. I just want to highlight one thing. So as Frank mentioned, we do have the little microphone button here. If you come here to the top on the options, you can turn the audio response on as well. Let me just restart this. So those are the things I'm going to demo here. But I just want to highlight, this is obviously the speech that is supported out of the box, but the voice, this is the narration, right? So having voice narration is different than building an assistant for a voice only, right? So if you're building an assistant just for a voice only channel, like let's say Alexa or Google Home, you create a different conversation. And obviously pictures would not be required. It will be just text, more concise, to be specific for that particular channel, right? What we have here, it's the voice narration of everything that is displayed on this dialog. So let's give it a try. So if I press here the microphone, I want to order pasta. Okay, I would say close enough. But it did recognize that. I didn't have the audio narration on, so let me just bring that on. So in reality, I needed to share the screen with sound. So let me just do that now. Okay, I think it's sharing with sound. So if I turn this on, bacon.
Please let me know your up TP3 selections. You can have
Cheese and cream.
For only $12 you ordered bacon pasta, creamy carbonara style.
Okay, I stopped it halfway, but you get the idea, right? You have this out of the box, no implementation effort required. You can use the voice. We have text to speech, and you also have the audio narration. And it's very, very simple to use. It's very cool feature that we have here. I'm going to pass back to Frank. He will tell you a little bit more about the options you have for different voices.
So here's just one slide, and that's probably more of a reference slide. So we got it. You see the reference from the developer Mozilla.org website that will allow you to add JavaScript. So for instance, we see that there's a call that we do in the settings file, which is bots on, and then we listen for when the widget opens. And when it opens, we just print a console log with the available voices. And this is what the browser supports. If you don't do anything, then as you can see, each of the voices is kind of related to some sort of language. There's also a way where you can override it, where you can tell in the configuration file, in the settings file, which voice you prefer having, but then make sure that the voice is available on all of the browsers that you would expect people to use with the web application that you run. So again, this is more like for reference. If you want to study that, just wait when the video becomes available and you can pause it here and have a look. So the last slide I have before I pass over to Bruno is a question: would voice first be a good design principle? Because as we outlined so often, where we said that if you're on a voice channel, you don't want to read all of the cards, you want to keep it crisp. So would it be a good idea to have voice as a design principle? And the truth is, if it works with voice, it will work everywhere. If it doesn't work with voice, or if it works everywhere in the rich client, probably it doesn't work with voice. So think about it, and maybe as an exercise, fold your hands on the back and talk to your screen and see, and you don't have to talk directly to it, have someone sitting next to it, and you simply tell that person what to do, and that person wouldn't be allowed to press any button. Yeah, so purely by telling the person to type something in, would you be able to control your digital assistant? If not, then you don't have a voice first design. A voice first design means everything is controllable through messages, through input text. So even like pressing a button, yeah, if for instance you have a card layout and there's a button that says, like as we have in our Passa Alfredo case, order, yeah, then the button order is the same on all cards, but you could probably say select the first just by index. So this is how you can have a voice first design built in, independent of the channel. But then you can be sure that if you have a voice first design, it always works with any channel. It works with SMS, but it also works with those channels where you can press the button, because pressing the button then is an additional convenience that people could use. So the recommendation is you don't necessarily have to kind of purely build voice first, because if voice is not a primary channel, but at least make sure that everything can be controlled with voice. Mostly customers want to have something a rich experience, and they could get this in MS Teams, in Slack, on the web, in Android, iOS. But if you make sure that your design could be controlled with voice, then at least you're well prepared for whatever messenger comes, or if then later people want to use it with voice. So with this, I think we pass it over to Bruno. So sorry for not allowing you a larger break, but we tried to stay somehow in the time frame. But I think it's kind of exciting to see what Bruno has. So passing it on.
So my name is Bruno. I am from Infobip. We are a WhatsApp broker, and we have a good partnership with Oracle. And I am based in Brazil. And I will talk a little bit about this integration with ODA. First, I'm going to talk about the benefits and what features that we have with Oracle or digital system with WhatsApp. Basically, we have those features like incoming and outgoing messages, text message with post-back actions, input and output media like image, audio, video, file, input location messages, and basically for integration enablement is very simple. We can just in Infobip site, we must have the Infobip account, WhatsApp sender already finished to use. We will provide the base URL and the account ready to set for incoming and outgoing message. And in Oracle side, we just need to have the Oracle Digital Assistant chatbot enabled and the URL and secret key. We have some success case here I would like to share with you. Those clients are from Brazil. Okay, I work in both cases, but we shouldn't disclose the name because we don't have yet the NDA, so that's why we don't disclose the client name. But we have the use case here. The first client is from hospitality and travel. So they send campaigns for WhatsApp campaigns for travel package, purchase, travel statuses, and stuff like that. And they had many clients asking for some travel or package information over telephone. And with WhatsApp and Infobip and Oracle, they could improve the customer care. So we can see some numbers here, like the average of the last 6 months, more than 3 million WhatsApp traffic message. The average of 8,300,000 monthly active users of WhatsApp monthly, and with ODA and a good chatbot creation, they could have the correct and efficient routing to the human agent with Oracle right now. And most part of the reputation was over chatbot, because that chatbot was created for them. It was complete. They could have travel information package, how is the flight time, stuff like that. And a good point here that they can have a reduction in average telephone call time from 10 hours to 10 minutes. So they had a lot of benefits with ODA and WhatsApp. And we have another client from utilities from Brazil. They are an energy supply company. So they just send WhatsApp campaigns, just letting the clients know about if they have energy outage service, or if they must pay bills or something like that, they can ask over chatbot. And we have that's some numbers here. And they have a very, very good seen message text average. So they have 87%. This is a very, very good text message. And basically, I'm going to show you here a demo. I have a live demo here that I'm going to show you. So basically, how it works. When we create a chatbot, the ODA will provide us the URL and secret. We configure that as the information in the client account that we create in InfoBip. And we have this URL that connecting on the client web service. We have a web service dedicated for that integration. And this web service communication is this URL. So we configure with the client URL base, and that's it. So ODA will post here, and we're gonna post here. So that's the complete flow. And I have a simple chatbot here just for account balance, available offices, end session, loan eligibility, and welcome chatbot. And I'm gonna show you here a chatbot that we have configured here. This is a InfoBip sender that we configured with them. So as you can see here, you just send a welcome message, so you don't need to configure or press only one or the right phrase. So you can just type the complete phrase. For example, I would like to know about my account balance, and he understand the phrase. So I just put information just to let you know that he understand the phrase. So I don't know, we can say, okay, what about the available offices? So we can see some offices available. Okay, no, thank you. So we can finish the session if we say closing session, and that's it. So, and the last but not least, we launched a new feature here. It will be available in the next month. Buttons and list with ODA. So we already finished this implementation, is in early access. So this is a new feature that we have in WhatsApp. If the client wants to have buttons and list, now ODA will understand. We already mapped all these features. So let me show you here. We create a chatbot for pizza. He will show me now. This is the option list. We chose the option. So for example, medium, and it will answer like that, and ODA understand and bring you the options. And you have the button list, button options, for example. That is the next message, this one. So you just click in the message, and we'll answer the message, and that's it. It's pretty simple, the integration. So we take about 10 or 15 minutes to connect the chatbot, and it's ready to use. That's it.
Yeah, thanks, Bruno, for this presentation. I think we can pass it now back to Jürgen, because
So thank you very much for the nice demo, Daniel. That was beautiful. And thanks for the whole webcast series. We also run a webcast series on successful customer implementations. So if you would like to learn more from customer cases, please join us in January. There will be a presentation on a digital assistant which supports a business intelligence data warehouse solution. In April, we will have a partner presenting the HCM bot, which is a pre-built bot for Oracle HCM. And in July, we will have a bot for Oracle CX service. Make sure you register bit.ly/ODA success. If you're working on an implementation, make sure you choose a certified partner who has implemented digital assistant before. And in the cloud marketplace, you can also find pre-built bots. For further questions and collaboration, please join us at Cloud Customer Connect. There you can raise your questions, you can submit innovations and earn badges. Make sure you subscribe to our quarterly newsletter to receive the updates, including upcoming webcasts, events and success stories and technical articles. It's all part of the customer newsletter. For partners, we also have a partner newsletter. where you can subscribe, and we also offer hands-on training for partners. You find the details in the newsletter. So quickly, the resources, make sure you visit our Oracle Digital Assistant website. The documentation is wonderful, including RT. Today's presentation will be posted at Video Hub, including the on-demand video, and ask your questions at Cloud Customer Connect. And for more details, please subscribe to the newsletter. If you're not yet a member in the partner community, that's for all OPN members, please register for the partner community and you get access to our partner community website. We offer hands-on training for partners, and if you want to learn more about InfoBip, here's the website where you find details about the InfoBip WhatsApp channel for Oracle Digital Assistant. With that, Frank, we come to the questions and answers. Which questions do you would like to highlight from the Q&A?
I would like to highlight one, which was a question about the Google chat. And the answer will be for every channel. So we do have a set of native channels, so that are configured out of the box, ready to be used upon configuration. But anything outside those native channels, things like Google Chat or Alexa, Google Home, Telegram, they can still be configured, but we need to use webhooks and a webhook server to actually establish connectivity with those channels. So as long as your channel supports the webhook connectivity, we can connect to those channels. So I think just wanted to pass that message along for all the channels out there.
So we had fun for 3 months. It was a wonderful webcast series. And I would like to say special thanks to the speakers and especially to you, Daniel, as you attended all of the sessions together with me. It was really a great experience. Thank you for that. And I hope to release a new series next year. And we will also continue with the customer success webcast series. Special thanks to Grant Ronald and the whole team. Thank you very much, Frank, for sharing such thoughtful, well-built German presentations. That's awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And thanks to you, Bruno and Grant, also for the nice documentation.
Thank you.
As a reminder, the whole webcast series is available on demand, including the samples we published. Please go to the Oracle Video Hub page or the Oracle registration page. There you find all information and you can watch the whole series of the 6 episodes. We will continue to promote it. It's really wonderful content to build for the bots, and we would love to get your feedback. So please make sure once you leave the Zoom webinar to complete the survey, to give us feedback on the series, what we can improve, what you really like, what you learned. If you have implemented successful Oracle Digital Assistant, please let us know. We are really interested to promote your success. So thank you very much for attending and keep safe.